Well, good afternoon. My name is Andy Middlestead, and I have the pleasure to be here today to talk a little bit about the assessment system in Michigan and where we are looking to go with our ESSA plan and the assessment vision at MDE. So just so folks know, the card color for the 2 o'clock hour for this is green. So if you have a question during this presentation about the assessment system, please use the green cards and hold them up, and I think people are getting familiar with this, and people will collect them and turn them in so we can hopefully answer some of your questions moving forward. Before I get started on this piece, I just want to let everyone know, because this question does still come up, this year the M-STEP is the same. We are doing the same tests this spring. It's going to look like it did last year. It'll work the same, so just in case anyone was still wondering, this year's tests are the same. What we're talking about is moving on beyond this school year and looking into the future with Michigan's assessment system. So some things that we're considering with the assessment vision and moving forward are really looking at the rigorous standards that we have here in Michigan. Rigorous standards that we adopted in 2010 for math and English language arts, and we just recently adopted new science standards, and hopefully we'll relook at some revised standards for social studies here in the next few months. So we know that we have some rigorous standards in Michigan, and we want to make sure we have more opportunities for our students to learn and demonstrate their knowledge of these standards. These standards are a critical core component of becoming a top 10 in 10 state here in Michigan. So we want to build on the foundation that these standards have set by focusing our instructional models on deeper learning. We also want to make sure that our assessments encourage and support this deeper learning and ask our students to demonstrate a broader range of skills, deeper and more broad than a simple fact recall like many tests from the past used to. The ESSA state plan and the ESSA process provides us opportunities to enhance our current assessment practices in support of these goals and in support of the rigorous standards that we have in Michigan. The assessment vision. So we've been talking about the assessment vision for a while now. This process started even before our ESSA plan began. It really started about 1.5 years ago when we wanted to look at the assessment system overall in Michigan instead of vision. Some of the broad goals for this assessment vision are to provide timely and meaningful and useful information and data back to several groups of folks. We want to make sure we can get reports out into the hands of some different key stakeholders out there. So certainly teachers, we want to put data in the hands of teachers along with appropriate training tools so that they can develop a game plan for meeting the needs of each of their child. We want to make sure that educators have information and data coming out of an assessment system that they're able to use in their classrooms, in their plan development, and in the process of educating the kids in their classes. We want to make sure that we can provide better information to parents. We want to make sure that parents get timely information on their students' proficiency with grade level expectations. That's similar to what we do now. We want to make sure parents know how their student is doing in terms of mastering the grade level standards that are set out for each of the students in each grade. We want to do this quicker, faster, and better. We want to make sure they can understand what their students what they need to do to make sure that they're reading in 3rd grade. We want to understand why do they get good grades if they aren't being proficient. So sometimes there's that catch that we see in assessment where a student might be an A student, but when they get their scores from an M-STEP, for an example, the M-STEP might give them a lower grade. Maybe they're not proficient there. We want to help provide information that can help parents understand why there might be a disconnect there, and we want to overall make sure that they have information available to really understand how their student is doing. Students, we want to make sure students have information about where they really are in terms of academic performance. We want to make sure that they can set goals to achieve. We want to make sure that there's information coming out through an assessment system that the state supports that allows students to see where they're at a point in time and set goals and develop a roadmap to success to make sure that they can master that grades levels task that they're working on. And certainly taxpayers, we want to make sure that we can truly represent through good information and data how we're performing as a state. We want to hold the schools accountable for growth and proficiency as we continue to move forward with the system. Some key components of our assessment system, or the assessment vision, a lot of these are just some enhancements that we're doing, modifying things, and some things we might be adding. But these are some things that we're looking at throughout this process of moving forward. Now again, this presentation or the process that I'm talking about today around the assessment vision and the assessment system, this is still in process. You know, this is not a final solution. What I'm reporting today and through this process is really giving a status update of where we're at, what we have found out, what we're looking looking at and how we can move forward with this. So some key components of the assessment system, we want to make sure that there's multiple points of feedback throughout the year. We want to make sure there's some increased consistency of use of benchmark tools around the state. We know that a lot of schools and districts use benchmark tools, and those tools are great. They do a good job supporting a need, but we want to make sure that we can somehow create some consistency around the use of those tools. We want to reduce overall testing time where we can. We know that is certainly a concern. We work hard to reduce testing time with the M-STEP as it is now. We also want to look at, how overall, include from state testing into local testing into classroom testing, can we develop a system that reduces overall testing time? We want to develop growth measures in addition to proficiency measures. That goes back to what I was saying earlier. We know we want to and need to continue to report proficiency based on law about how students in schools are doing, but we want to also improve our efforts in providing growth measures so that you can see a student's growth over time within a year or over years as we move forward. Again, we want clear, actionable data to go out into those groups like I talked about in the schools and in the homes so that people have that. We want to support individual lesson plans for each student. We want immediate feedback for educators, or as close to immediate as we can possibly do. We need to continue to support and assess writing and problem solving to prepare students for success. Writing and problem solving are key components of those rigorous standards that I mentioned earlier, and we want to make sure that we can continue to support those with whatever assessments we put together. Again, goal setting for students. We want to maintain our high academic standards. Again, continuing to support those rigorous standards that we've adopted in Michigan or hopefully will adopt soon. We want to have continuous accountability. We don't want to create a gap in the system again like we may have had between the MEP and the M-STEP moving forward. We want to have a seamless transition in that accountability system so it can just continue on with whatever change we might do. We want to make sure we have assessment items that must be developed to the standards to meet the rigor of the standards. We want to make sure that the items on our assessments are at the level and are connected directly to those rigorous standards that we have out in the state. We want to make sure we're truly tapping in to the rigor that those standards talk about and hope for. This graphic is a little bit of a symbol of the overall picture that we're talking about. Again, we're looking at a bigger picture than just knowledge and fact recall. So if you see at the bottom of the triangle there, you see knowledge. If you look back to the old MEP days where you had Scantron sheets and multiple choice questions, that's really down in the bottom there. As we look at the overall system for assessment moving forward and the standards that we have now, we want to look at this larger picture, talking about how are we preparing our students for careers in colleges? How are we looking at problem solving and teamwork? Are our students going to be prepared to move forward with careers in college after they leave our schooling system here in Michigan? That's what we want to look at with our assessment system and, of course, with our overall ESSA plan as we move forward. Some things that we have talked about, we know that assessment should be an integrated part of instruction. We want tools and assessments to be built in to instruction. We don't want that to just be a standout side piece that happens once a year. We want to make sure that assessment represents a range of skills we want students to be able to demonstrate. Again, not just recalling facts and information that they may have learned about science, for example, or not just doing basic arithmetic problems. We want to make sure that our assessments can cover the broad range of skills that are the intent of our standards. We know that assessment should take a variety of forms. It shouldn't just be one end-of-year multiple choice test. We want it to be fluid and be a good, useful tool. We want it to happen organically throughout the day and the year. We want it to provide meaningful information to teachers and leaders and be delivered in a manner that is engaging to students and requires critical thinking. We want the assessment process to be something that's engaging for our students. We don't want it to be something that's put off-ish or scary to our kids. We want our students to be able to engage with the process. Some things that assessment should not be, we really don't want it to be just a once-a-year event. Again, I don't think it necessarily is now. From the state, perhaps it is. But we really want to look at the whole system and how can the state support an entire system as we move forward. We don't want assessment to only be the state assessment. We don't want it to be just that one test that nobody likes. We want it to be a system that can provide all that information that I talked about earlier. And we don't want it to be seen as a punitive measure as opposed to an informational measure, a tool that can provide data and information to improve instruction throughout the school year. The graphic we have here, people have probably seen before. This is the same graphic that we put out earlier in the year as part of the original visioning process for the assessment system and through their first round of feedback. that we've done. Now, this chart has not changed since then, but it's still the goal that we're shooting for. And one of the things the action team that was put together around assessment was, one of the charges that we had really was not to come up with a new vision, because this was the vision and the target we were shooting for, but we really spent some time looking at it and thinking critically about it and trying to turn over any rocks we could to see, what do we need to think about? What do we need to look at? How are we going to make this work? How will we be successful in this? How will this help students? So we really spent a lot of time digging into it. I'm not going to go through all of the cells, but the gist of it is, again, it moves towards, can the state provide a benchmarking assessment system in every grade level? And in some of those grades, this chart talks about third, fourth, fifth, or third, fourth, sixth, and seventh grade. Can we use only benchmark assessments in those grades as the state required assessment? And then can we move towards, in fifth and eighth grade, having a summative M-STEP-like assessment or a different summative assessment in just those grades. So that's what this vision really was shooting for, is can we move towards a benchmark system in lieu of a summative system in some of those grades. Not necessarily all of them, but some of them. Now the ESSA law does allow that. It does allow for an option to say, hey, you can do benchmark assessments in some grades or all your grades, as long as you can roll up and develop a summative assessment score from those benchmark assessments. So hold on to that for a second as we continue on. But this was the vision we were looking for. This is what we're trying to shoot for. But we spent a lot of time turning over those rocks, like I mentioned. And we also spent some time going through a request for information process. We wanted to see what the this is the next slide. Yep. We wanted to see what the vendor community around assessments, where they were at in terms of options to develop and put out a system that would meet this vision. We wanted to see where their readiness was at and things like that. So we went through a request for information process as one of the steps we're doing in terms of looking forward to what can we do and what options do we have to move forward with this vision. So an RFI, or request for information, it's an official process that the state does go through the purchasing department at the state. It's not a contractual process, it's purely just an informational process. So we wanted to do that, to consider some implementation things. We knew we wanted to continue to innovate with our assessments, including problem solving, teamwork, and critical thinking, and how best to integrate that into the overall assessment system. So whatever happens with our assessments moving forward, we know we want to continue focusing and actually increase focus on problem solving, teamwork, and critical thinking, and how we can continue to focus on those in our overall assessment system. And again, we talked about this a little bit. As we go through this process of looking at the assessment system, we want to make sure we watch the federal guidelines and regulations out there. And as many things these days with the U.S. Department of Ed, it's unclear right now as to what they might say about how ESSA is going to drive or guide states to administer assessments. So one of the things that the U.S. Department does is they'll issue regulations around specific areas of a new law, in which they've been doing that for a lot of things, except we haven't seen anything yet for assessment. So we don't quite, for lack of better words, have the rules of engagement, if you will, of assessment and how it will apply to the ESSA law. So we're still kind of watching and waiting to see what the U.S. Department will say around assessment and what we can and maybe cannot do. So we are watching that piece. So again, going back to the RFI process, this is a process that there were three main things we were looking at. We put out a written document, and then we had 7 vendors come out and they did presentations with us, and there are 3 main things that we were looking for in terms of what information did we want out of this to help us learn more and help guide our process in terms of when and how we might be able to move forward with this. So the when is a big question. We wanted to find out through this process, when would vendors be possibly ready to put out a system that would meet our vision? You know, would folks from the vendor community be able to put out a system, you know, this fall, in another year, in 5 years? Never. We wanted to find out when would folks be ready to move forward with this kind of a system. We wanted to get an idea around accommodations. We wanted to know which vendors were ready to roll with the accommodation tools that we have for our students with disabilities. If we were going to modify or change our assessment system and possibly change a vendor, we wanted to make sure that we can continue to support our students with disabilities with the same types of accommodations that we have now. We wouldn't want to move backwards in that area. We don't want to offer them now and then take 10 of them away in 2 years, for example. So we wanted to see where vendors are at in terms of accommodations. Then again, we wanted to see if they had any ideas about an overall approach to this system. Remember I said the law talks about you can use benchmark interim tests throughout the school years, but you have to add the scores together somehow and come up with a summative score. We need to make sure that it was ready to do that. So we were curious what the vendors had to say about possible approaches and how they might be able to do this. So what did we find out? Well, here's our three main questions. When? Most vendors weren't quite ready to potentially roll out a new system in the fall of 17. Launching a new model. This was particularly apparent to vendors that historically have not provided statewide summative assessments in the past. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that some of these vendors were bad by any means. It just means there's a difference between vendors out there that have administered high-stakes state assessments that are used for accountability and all of these things before, and then vendors that have just provided assessments that could be optional and things like that in the past. They're just two different purposes at the time. So we did see a little bit of a gap there. So what we did find is folks weren't quite ready for launching a brand new system in the fall of 17. Accommodations, again, that's an important piece we wanted to dig into. There is a broad spectrum of tool availability across these vendors. We did hear from our current vendor that we have now, and they have a list of assessment accommodations that we've been working on. And then we heard from a gamut of other folks that were at various places in the spectrum. Again, a lot of those that didn't have them quite yet were vendors that haven't had to provide these accommodations before. It's not that they don't want to or aren't willing to, they just haven't had to before because they haven't been in this space before in terms of high-stakes state assessment. So again, the accommodations weren't quite ready yet. And in terms of overall approach, everyone, of course, is eager to work with us when we're looking to offer business to somebody. But we heard from the vendors that they really mostly all recommended still doing some manner of summative assessment in each grade level. So again, that vision, that chart that we looked at before talks about, well, in 4 of the 6 grades between 3 and 8, let's use benchmarks and come up with a solution there, and let's continue to have a summative assessment in 5th and 8th grade. Well, these vendors, they may have called it something different or tweaked the name somewhat, but they all said, we'll offer benchmark assessments throughout the year, but still at the end, we'll have some sort of assessment that kind of captures all of it at once. So that was interesting. We didn't necessarily expect that, but that's what we heard. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second because I might have some ideas about why we heard that from them. Some other learnings. Again, the action team for this assessment option really had a different task in terms of we weren't supposed to come up with a new assessment system. We were supposed to overturn those rocks like I mentioned. So some things that we've heard and talked about over the last several months as we looked at using benchmark assessments instead of a summative assessment are all the things that you have to have with a summative assessment. So let me try to explain that in a different way. So at least once a year, a state needs to offer a summative assessment that captures knowledge obtained around those grade level content standards, whatever they might be. And in those assessments, you need to have accommodations, like I said, and you need to make sure you have writing and constructive response. It needs to be highly aligned. So the things and the conversations we were starting to have and hear from folks was we were starting to get concerned about putting a different wrapper on assessments that haven't typically been, for lack of better words, wrapped in a summative assessment wrapper before. So for example, if we're looking at using benchmark tests instead of a summative test, so if a series of benchmarks in 3rd grade become the state test, we were going to have to add some things to them. We were going to have to add constructive response items. Kids are going to have to write to meet the current standards. We were going to have to offer those accommodations. Again, some vendors weren't quite ready yet. How would we manage that? How would we negotiate that? We would want to certainly move forward with technology-enhanced items. We moved forward quite a ways in the last couple of years with the M-STEP in terms of technology-enhanced items. We don't want to let off the gas on that necessarily, so we would need to add those things. And again, once it becomes the summative test, whether it's one test at the end or a series of tests over the year, it becomes a required assessment. So what does that mean? That means you have to pre-ID, you have to do tested roster, you have to calculate participation rates. All of those things that we do in the schools for the M-STEP now, you are going to have to do multiple times a year. So that caused our group to kind of sit down and say, okay. So we had to think about that and weigh that option. We had to say, well, it is kind of exciting to look at a benchmark system throughout the year. Those tests might be shorter. They might not. We don't know exactly what they'll look like after we add writing and things like that. But we had to think about, when it becomes the required test, it becomes a secure administration. It becomes a required test. So we have to look at, do we like what's happening to the product or the benchmark test when we wrap it up in a summative required assessment wrapper? Then again, will people still like it when it becomes part of the test? Benchmark assessments are great, whether they're ones you build and do yourself in your school and district, if you purchase one from one of the vendors. They do serve a great purpose, and they do a lot of good things. But right now, we have to remember they're optional. They're completely autonomous. You can do what you want with them. So is it still going to be looked at positively once we move towards requiring them? So things that we're thinking about. And again, along with all these other things, the ESSA coming along, the third grade reading law just popped out. So if you remember that chart, it talks about third grade being optional with benchmark tests throughout the year. That's what we're going to do instead of a summative test. How does that tie into the new third grade reading law, where we have to have some sort of a third grade proficiency rate on English language arts that tells us how well a kid is reading or not reading? That's something we've had to consider. So what now? Well, again, this spring's going to be the same, so we know that for sure. So get ready for MSTEP 2017. We're having a lot of conversations at the department about the best ways we can implement the vision successfully. We do want to move forward with this. We want to make it work well. We want to, again, streamline and create that consistency around some benchmark assessment options throughout the year. So we want to make sure we're creating a good, positive solution for this vision. We're considering and thinking about what to do about the summative assessments. Can we use a summative assessment as like a spring benchmark, if that makes sense? Can we build a summative assessment in the spring that can tie to whatever benchmark we might do in the fall and the winter optionally? Can we make that work so that we can keep track of handling that summative assessment in the spring and then looking at the other things? Now, if we, just for the other things we've talked about, if we keep a summative assessment of some manner in the spring of each year, that loosens up those requirements on the benchmark tests in the fall and the winter. Again, we only have to have one summative assessment a year to meet all those requirements of the law and have all the pre-ID and all that kind of stuff. Can we make that work? Can we look at a system where a summative is a spring benchmark or something else? Because if we make the fall and the winter benchmark options optional and not required, it makes them a lot more or less stressful, perhaps, if you want to say it that way. So we're thinking about those things. Again, we know that spring 2017 MSTEP will remain the same. We're looking at when any changes might occur moving forward. As of right now, if you were to ask me right now, spring of 2018, MSTEP will probably be the same. This really might be, if we're going to build out a new system, it might more be a fall 18, spring 19, if we're going to look at a whole new thing. There might be some opportunities for next year to phase in some pieces, but if we're going to make any wholesale changes or modifications, it might be, the next fall before we really launch anything out about that. But we have not decided anything for sure yet, but time is not in our favor, as it rarely is, in terms of making big changes for next year. So we'll have to see how that goes. But again, we're excited to keep moving towards this vision and trying to build a system that will be best for our kids and to provide that actionable data that our parents and students and teachers need to really continue to improve the assessments, the education system in our state. So, green cards. And purple general ones. The green ones are for me. Purple ones are for Vanessa. All right, I'll wait for one more, and then you can still turn them in if you need to. All right, so first question. Adding benchmark scores up for a summative could add error into assessment score. How would you address this? That is true. That is a true statement. So anytime you try to add numbers together, you can introduce error, and it's likely would be a challenge to look at how would you take a fall and a spring benchmark test and compute a summative test. We have not, the second part, how would we address this? We haven't dug that far into it yet, honestly. I have had some conversations with peers from around the country and some assessment experts, and well, has this been done before, or how would it look? And it really hasn't been done before, so there's not a, oh, here's the paper that says how you do this, or here's the guidance on how to do this. So that is a true statement, though. We would have to be very careful, and if we were to add these things together to minimize possible error or interference in terms of smashing those scores together. Second question on this one is, how would an optional winter benchmark test affect accountability when all schools aren't completing it? We'd have to look at that. If you were to ask me right now, what I would probably do is make the winter purely optional in terms of accountability. If you take it, we would provide some reports and some scores about it, but we wouldn't use it for the accountability purposes. We might just smash together the fall and the spring. Don't know yet for sure, but you're right. You know, if we're going to build an accountability system and only a third of the schools do the winter benchmark, we can't, you know, hold those schools in a better favor or worse favor than the schools that only do a fall and a spring. So that's a good question. And again, we just don't have all the answers yet. That's why we're kind of moving forward and trying to dig up anything we can on some of these things. This question, when will the RFB for the assessment system be published? We don't know for sure. We're still trying to figure out if and when we need to do an RFP. It hasn't been firmly decided yet that we will do an RFP. You know, we don't know. We're digging into the system and seeing where we're at with things. I'd love to wait and hopefully get some sort of assessment regulations from the U.S. Department and to make sure that we're good to go. But we don't know yet when it will be released or if it will be released, kind of thing. Feedback, a lot of our schools will be excited about a non-summative benchmark test option. So clarification, what are characteristics of benchmark versus summative tests? So here's how I would look at it. So a summative test is what we've known as the M-STEP or the MEP over the years. So it's given once a year. It's meant to measure how a student mastered all of the content in that school year. You know, how well did they learn all of 4th grade mathematics? And are they proficient in it or not? So a summative test is supposed to measure the sum of all of their learning through some period of time. A benchmark test, in the examples that we're looking at here, is a 3 times a year, but you could also do a benchmark every month or every quarter, or however you want to do it. A benchmark test is really more of an assessment that's given to be used as a litmus test, if you will, in terms of how are kids progressing towards learning the stuff that we're teaching. You know, I just did a whole unit on fractions in my math class. How well did my students learn on fractions so that I can learn and adjust my instruction in my classroom? Maybe I need to spend another week on it to make sure they get it a little bit better or not. So that's a short version of how I would kind of explain that difference there. So is Michigan still looking to be one of the 7 states in the ESSA Innovative Assessment Pilot? Don't know that for sure. So it was an interesting process that we looked at the innovative assessments. There was a separate work group around innovative assessments, specifically built around problem solving and critical thinking skills. And what we realized is we didn't actually need to be in an innovative assessment pilot to build a component of our system that dealt with innovative problem solving and critical thinking skills. That work group had a specific task to work through that. And where they kind of landed of, you know, they had a lot of conversations around, well, can we in elementary school and middle school and high school, can we build a component of the summative assessment that kids do some sort of a group activity and work with partners to build something out? And where that group kind of landed is maybe we don't want to build something like that, a group activity, if you will, and put it into some sort of a high stakes testing system, but maybe that group really should spend some time looking at how can we provide some tools and resources that educators can use to embed right in their instruction of whatever they're teaching to help kids do that better. There's a lot of concern around, and we all know this, group activities, there's often, you know, someone that does more work than another person, or someone's dead weight, or however we all want to explain it kind of thing. There was concern around putting some sort of a high stakes-ness to that. So that group is working on how can we provide tools and resources and measurement tools that people could use around these things. But right now, we don't know if we need to be in the Innovative Assessment Pilot. The Innovative Assessment Pilot is really an option for states if they want to offer some schools or district an option to do something totally different than what their state assessment is. So for example, in Michigan, if school A is doing the M-STEP, if school B wanted to make their own test and use that as the high-stakes state assessment, then we would need to have some sort of innovative assessment pilot. If we just want to build out some new cool features of an assessment statewide, we don't need to be in that pilot. So as of right now, we don't know if we'll be in that or not, or if we'll have to. We keep looking at it, and we'll move forward from there. What about K2? So the K2 assessment, we've been working on that for years, as many of you know, and have journeyed along with us. Right now, we did launch the K2 assessments this fall. We focus on first and second grade, and in the spring, we'll have the kindergarten, first and second grade benchmark tools out there that we've developed. We are going to provide reports for those, and we are putting those out there. So those continue to move along. We're watching those carefully as we want to make sure that they're successful, and we want to make sure we can get good information out to schools so they can use it to, again, look at how instruction is going in those young grades. So we're building those out and continuing those. As folks know, there's also legislation out there that allows Michigan to provide grants for schools to buy their own early childhood or K through 2 tools. So it is a little complex or convoluted right now as we're working through a situation where we have law that says we need to administer these tools to all kids, but then it also says we'll give everybody money if they apply to buy their own tool to do something different. So we're working through that and trying to make it as clear as we can. But we're excited about the tools. We're going to continue to build those out and to start being able to provide some reports for those moving forward. Who were the vendors that we had for the oral presentations? Let me see if I can get them all. We heard from 7 vendors. We heard from Data Recognition Corporation. We heard from Measurement Incorporated. We heard from NWEA. We heard from Measured Progress. We heard from ACT Aspire. We heard from Questar and Curriculum Associates. They were a co-presentation. How many am I at? We heard from 6. I'm missing 1. Smarter Balance came and did a presentation. Smarter Balance isn't necessarily a vendor, but they are indeed an assessment provider and a content provider, so they came out and did a presentation as well. I almost picked this one up. It says, remind people to use the green cards. So, okay. So this is a concern about, well, what if we do end up going to some sort of an annual assessment at each grade level? There might be some current concerns about that. How if we only have one annual assessment, would we continue to have all those things I talked about of multiple points of feedback and things like that? I think whatever we do moving forward, we're going to build a system that has assessment tools throughout the year. The question just is what does that spring look like? Are we able to connect some sort of a summative model assessment to a benchmark assessment in the fall and optionally in the winter moving forward? So whatever we do, we're going to have assessment tools available throughout the school year so that all of those points I talked about earlier can be addressed and met in terms of providing information for growth and making sure that feedback is given out to the students and the parents and the educators and the taxpayers moving forward. I think that's it. So thank you very much. Thanks for hanging in there today. And Vanessa's coming up with some overall questions.
Okay, so we do have a little bit of time before we're done, and one of the comments we got back on a general feedback card was maybe people would like to have a chance to ask questions more broadly or have some additional interaction time. So we will certainly not keep anyone in the room or on the video stream if they don't want to be here, but if we do have some moments for some general questions. So Alisand has a microphone. She'll come around. We don't have a colored card for this portion of the presentation, but are happy to take general questions now, or any follow-ups that we didn't get to, or any of that sort of thing. There's one over here, Alisand.
Hi. Just hold it there. Okay.
I had two questions. How does our email input, if we correspond with you, get weighted under the category where it's entered? For instance, see, I took one access equity, if I wanted to put things under there, okay? How would that be weighted as opposed to if you're in a public meeting and you're taking feedback?
Right. So that's a good question. And there have been throughout this process a lot of questions about process. Whose voice means the most? How do you weigh this against that? There's not an easy answer. What we have really strived to do is record it all, summarize it, and present it to back to the action teams, present it to the tactical review, the external review, present it to the state superintendent. Really, at the end of the day, for me, it's about when I sit down with him in the plan, at each stage being able to quantify, here's the types of feedback we heard. There have been a number of times where we've asked action team leads to do surveys, so we can even say numerically, like here's how many people, 30% agree with this or not. So, email feedback versus in-person feedback versus anything else is not weighted any more or less. We're trying to categorize it and bring it all up in some way that's transparent. And we know we're coming to a time in the decision-making process where decisions are going to be made, and some number of people who said one thing, it's not going to be the thing we do. And making sure that people understood that nobody's comments got lost or were disregarded, but that doesn't mean those things always went that way. So really all forms of input are equally weighted and considered or represented to the superintendent. And then as far as his decision making, I think he's trying to look across the breadth and span of what people are saying. So.
Okay, thank you. And then the second one was in that category of access equity, some of the headings like art is that going to be expanded, and access to technology? I can see the wording there is limited, and I wondered if that is a section, it's a very important section, and is it going to be fleshed out?
Yes, and so you're speaking specifically about the transparency dashboard, right? And like Kim said, so I will repeat this for everyone in case you didn't pick up on this point. The transparency dashboard is not something that's required that we do under ESSA. It's something we want to do in support of our 10 and 10. So we have a lot more talk to have. So again, on the transparency dashboard is something we haven't spent quite as much time on in discussion with the larger groups, because it's the action team just generated these concepts. So please do put in, I guess what I'm trying to say is this is a place that is even perhaps a little further back in its development, and we want the feedback on, so if those are too limiting, they need to be more, and then we need to do that implementation work around exactly what will it be, and even do some additional putting out prototypes and saying, well, we think it's going to be this, now react to that. And that goes to a question which I addressed during accountability, but I'll return to, because it was a general question I had on my stack about joining action teams. So like I said, the action teams are, as they stand, are retiring briefly. But we do, if you sign up for our ESSA listserv, if you are in contact with us, we will be looking for ways to put out, like I just said, prototypes or early drafts of things to a wide range of stakeholders and have you give us some specific feedback on some of these pieces, the exact transparency dashboard, the comprehensive needs assessment. There's a number of things around educator quality. There's a lot of implementation steps that we'll need to have continued conversations, but the form that conversation will take was going to be a little different. So yes, there's lots of room for input. Yes, it'll change, and we'll show it out again a few times before we finalize it.
Ironically, we just got an email comment. So here we are. So we got an email question that talks about looking at the new assessment vision and the assessment system, and given the nature of there's often transitioning district test coordinators and staff and things like that, we know those roles often shift throughout the school year. As we look at the system, are we going to be working to develop some sort of professional development and training resources available, especially if the assessment system could be happening throughout the school year? And the answer is yes, we're going to be working on that. We're actually working really hard to try to put together some some modules this year, even just around the M step, that we'll be able to build off of whatever happens with our assessment system. So yes, we do get the email questions, and we're able to make sure we can answer those as well.
Just a quick question on kind of the legal authority of a benchmarking assessment. Federal law says we have to test in reading and math every year. What would you do if districts just said we're not going to give 2 tests, we're only willing to give 1? And how would you address between districts that would give benchmarking tests and those that would refuse? Is there a way to make them?
So do you mean districts don't want to give 2 tests as in don't want to give a 2 times a year benchmark, or don't want, so there's a couple pieces of this. There is state law and state requirements around transparency, testing, and accountability. So all Michigan students need to be tested. There's federal law there as well. Like Andy said, there's a lot going on at the federal level. So, but the federal law does still say annual assessment in math and ELA, grades 3 through 8 and 11. Moving toward a benchmark, what we would need to do is say the benchmark is the state assessment. That is the test for the year. So that would mean both components, or whatever we specify as the requirement, because again, in this model, both parts of the benchmark are necessary to cover the content. So it would be kind of the same as if a district says, well, we're not going to give the M step. We get into kind of a, well, you have to give the M step, and it gets into the opt-out question too, that districts are required to give the state assessment, and then if parents are making decisions about sending their children to school on those days, that's a parent choice. But our legal authority is with the district, and there is wording in law, in our state law, that says about districts must give the state assessment. So if this was the state assessment, you'd have to give it in its entirety. Now what we want to do is get to something we can agree on enough that there isn't this kind of like, if it gets to the point of flexing the legal muscle, we need to back the train up and figure out what's going on. But that's, you ask what is the legal authority, that's technically the legal authority, but we want to find a system that does all those goals that Andy was talking about. Knowing that, assessment isn't, state assessment in particular, isn't probably ever the thing people are going to give 3 cheers for, but we hope we can get to a place where it happens, it's reliable and valid, it doesn't stress everyone out, and doesn't take a lot of time, and it just kind of occurs as part of the year, and then we can actually go back, not even go back to, but continue focusing on instruction and things like that. So,
This is a popular thing.
Hi, I had a question about the transparency dashboard. Do you know who or what groups might be involved in the visual design of that, and when might there be some potential mock-ups for feedback and consultation?
yeah. So if you are the sort of person who loves visual design, maybe you are, we would love to know that, so please send us an email. And I do mean that. We have resources at the department, a few, and at SEPI who do graphic design and who do some of that interactive web stuff, but I think it's a place where there is probably greater expertise outside the department. And so now Kim did what we asked, got the team to agree on what the indicators are. Now we have to figure out how do you display it, how do you interact with it, and we'd love to, this is one of those implementation groups too, like, can you use this information? And again, there are some very talented people at the department in this space and at SEPI in this space. I am not one of them. You ask me to mock up a dashboard and you will hate it. So I also know there are visually and graphically skilled people who could really help us. So if you are interested, please let us know. Your other question was about time frame. We'd like to start in the next few months getting through some of the details and get some mock-ups out. Ideally, spring, start seeing some mock-ups. Like Kim showed, a lot of the transparency dashboard won't be fully on board until a little bit, that's a little bit down the road. I'd also like to see us use the rule of runs. A lot of these data haven't been shown back to districts in this way. So something we've learned with accountability and other data reporting, data is often dirty until you show it to people, and then they say, oh, that wasn't right. I didn't mean to report it that way. I put in all zeros because it wasn't required. Or so there needs to be a space when we mock it, or not even just mock it up, but run it and show it on the secure side of the portal for districts to look at, which I'm betting $1 million right now will inevitably spark a bunch of, our data's wrong, don't publish this conversations, and then we'll need to do that. And somebody can hold me to the $1 million if I'm wrong, and who's going to give me $1 million if I'm right? There was volunteer, I'm sure.
I have like 3 questions.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
So my first one is, and I'm sure there's an obvious answer, but for me, I'm trying to understand it better. So there's already big testing companies out there like produce Iowa Testing, they produce the NAEP, and formerly the MAT 7 was. Were any of those considered, or they're not in state, or?
Yep. So like Andy said, of the 7 that replied, NWEA is the company that produces the map. They were one. Iowa Test, they didn't do the RFI. That doesn't mean they wouldn't bid for an RFP if we put one out. They still could. And then the NAEP, that's a little bit more complicated of a question. It's not actually. It's a federal, anyway, they're not per se a company. They're like a federal contract with a vendor.
Okay.
But we did have, I would say of the 7 that bid, they were really representative of the field, of who's out there in terms of assessment vendors. It wasn't every single vendor, but it was a lot of the leading vendors, particularly in the benchmarking space.
And then I'm not totally 100% knowledgeable on the whole 3rd grade law thing. What happens though if there's a large number of 3rd graders that aren't at 3rd grade?
Yeah. So like Andy mentioned in his presentation, the passage of that 3rd grade reading law in the midst of this leaves us with a lot of questions to sort through about implementation of that law, how the things in ESSA, like the assessment and accountability, can support that law, support schools, making sure students get to that level that the law requires. But there is a very real programming question of if too many students are getting held back, what does that mean for school and district allocations of resources and time and class size and all sorts of things. So I think this is certainly, implementing that law is a big task ahead of us as an entire education enterprise that we're still sorting through exactly what that might look like.
Okay, and then I just want to, put it out there that maybe, since the comprehensive need assessment is such a critical part of everything else falling into place, that it be, mandated that schools have a PD day that they just do the CNA so that you have that buy-in.
That's a really interesting idea. We don't per se mandate PD days like that. We mandate how many hours you have to offer, but I think it's a good point about thinking about giving it the state continuing education clock hours, or and this actually leads into a larger question around professional development that is something Abby alluded to. We need to, as a department and as a state, stop doing such a scattershot approach to PD. It's kind of everybody do everything. With our 10 and 10 goals, with the fact that there's certain practices we want to incentivize, one of our intentions coming out of this, not just through ESSA, but in our work, is to be more directive about some of that PD time that districts have to give and say, here, or something like, here's a menu of 20 things. You can train on any of these and they count, but it's got to be one of these, so that there's more direction into the things we know are good and high quality and support our key goals. So your suggestion about linking the CNA and the time for that into PD is a great idea. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I think we need to think about how we can require and incentivize. Something you learn when you work at the state is requirements are okay, but it's even better if you can incentivize people to do it. Sticks and carrots, carrots work better. So there's the question down here, Allison.
So we're implementing our new teacher evaluation systems and things like that currently, and so I've heard a lot of talk of student growth percentiles, in terms of measuring growth, which is important for me working with the students that I do. I see a lot of growth that may not be measured in terms of proficiency. So is there a lot of education going to go out to educators about how that works in terms of individually, how we can measure how our students are growing, but also it sounds like that's going to be measured for districts. So how is growth measured if you just have a summative assessment each year?
Right. So that was a many-layered question. Let me kind of take them going backward. You are you're absolutely correct that the way we measure growth with the year-to-year test is with a student growth percentile. Or any measure of year-over-year growth, Michigan uses a student growth percentile now. We used to use, with the MEP, we used a transition table. Some of you remember the performance level change indicators. But either way, it's a way to say, here's where you were last year, here's where you are this year, and that is growth, or that is just maintaining, or that's actually declining, to give information to schools, districts. As part of the educator evaluation implementation, our team, Abby leads that team as well, it's not a team, it's an office, Abby directs that office, just was able to bring on some staff resources. So we have a bunch of guidance coming out in the next bit around student growth in evaluations, not just the state data, but all sorts of recommendations and best practice and different models you can use. For every, as many of you know, for each type of teacher, there's different ways to approach growth, and it kind of depends on what data is available and best practice, and some subjects are different than others. So you should be using your student growth percentile as a portion of that information, but it should not be the whole story. And I would still say that even if we had benchmark assessments, I would always say that state assessment data and growth from state assessment data should be part of the data picture, but not the entire data picture. You need to look at your local assessments. You need to look at other measures of growth around portfolio or whatever makes more sense. And so this is some of the guidance coming out that growth is hard to pin down and measure exactly with precision, which is why if you triangulate your information, you get to a better picture of a teacher's portfolio of growth they've been able to get out of their students. So, last call. What a good audience. You guys were very, I didn't see hardly anybody sleeping, and you were very engaged, which always impresses me because it's not easy for me to stay awake sometimes. Okay, we do genuinely want to thank Wayne Risa, the great camera crew, and everybody who helped put this on today. What wonderful hosts, and it's just it's really nice as the department to be able to call our ISD partners and say, hey, can you host us and about 60 of our friends, and have them say, sure, come on down. Video of today's sessions, should you want to watch again, or if you need to share with friends who weren't here, and the PowerPoint copy will be available on mystream.net. mystreamnet.org, mystreamnet.org, and linked from our website, that's www.michigan.gov/ESSA, ESSA, in a few days. So all this will be up for sharing and your viewing pleasure. Like we said, in the coming weeks, we will be putting up an online survey. If you haven't already signed up for our ESSA listserv, do that. It's on our website as well. Be sure to visit our website frequently. It's full of exciting information all the time. And oh, thank you. There's more slides. Let me skip ahead to this part. This is what I was just talking about, our website. Signing up for ESSA Notes updates. Well, we do put out a really nice ESSA Notes. Our communications team does a great job with that. For online surveys, you can click the Get Involved link. You should be following us on Facebook and Twitter anyway, because we are exciting on Twitter and Facebook. So we are going to be sharing, backing up a little, this is where all the information from today will be. So the informational videos, additional informational videos, online surveys, so make sure you go to this website. We have more forums. If you came today or you watched today, you do not need to come again unless you really just enjoy our company so much that you can't stand to be without us. But we will be covering the same information at these feedback forums, and then we'll be presenting at State Board of Ed in December, and then getting into January, February, March is when we anticipate having a fairly finalized plan and be doing that public comment. Again, we need to look at the timelines a little with the regs and the new timelines coming out, but still marching ahead, still looking at first of the year, getting a plan down in writing so we can get to final information on that. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm even more exciting than the department, so you wouldn't want to miss that. And please don't forget to complete your meeting evaluation. We do covet your feedback. We want to make these useful times for you. So thank you again. Thank you for everybody who watched us online, and have a great afternoon.